You are neither pitiable nor cursed by bad luck. The problem is that you're still waiting for a permission that will never come. In this audiobook, you won't find any catchy phrases to post on Instagram, nor self-help recipes to numb yourself for a while. Here we talk about your excuses, your fear of taking action, about that comfort disguised as caution that's costing you your life. It won't be pleasant. It won't be easy. But if you really listen, you won't walk out the same way you came in. Chapter 1. The Price of Waiting for the Perfect Moment. There's a scene that plays over and over again in the lives of millions, and if you're not careful, it could be yours too. This scene has no epic music, no dramatic dialogue, no jaw-dropping finale. It's much simpler and more brutal. You sit there, staring at the calendar, promising yourself that tomorrow, next Monday, or maybe next month, you'll finally begin. It doesn't matter what. Maybe it's about changing jobs, ending a relationship that no longer works, signing up for that course you've been putting off for years, or finally allowing yourself to be happy. There's always an imaginary date in the future when everything will align perfectly, when you'll have more strength, more money, more time, more clarity, more permission. And in the meantime, your life passes by, unspectacularly, without great drama. It simply slips away. The insidious thing is that waiting masquerades as reason. We've been taught to believe that postponing is a mature choice, that it's logical to have all the answers before acting, that it's emotionally responsible not to rush. We've been told to be patient, not to decide in the heat of the moment, to weigh every variable carefully. What nobody told us is that this endless weighing and waiting inevitably becomes the most comfortable and the most dangerous excuse for doing nothing. What starts as caution turns into a golden cage without bars. The notion of the perfect moment is one of the most elegant lies we tell ourselves. And the worst part, it's comfortable. As long as you're waiting, you can't fail. As long as you're waiting, you don't have to show up. As long as you're waiting, you can keep painting that ideal version of your future in your mind. Smooth, error-free, criticism-proof. As long as you're waiting, you live in the safe zone of the hypothetical. But time doesn't wait. That's the bitter truth we love to ignore. Time keeps moving, with or without you. There's something you must grasp, even if it hurts. You will never feel fully ready. Not 100%. Not with that absolute certainty you're hoping for. That certainty is a mirage. It will never arrive. There will always be doubts, always risks, always that queasy feeling in your stomach telling you it may not be the right time. And that's okay. That unease is the price of movement. If you feel it, it means one thing at least. You're alive. Something inside you hasn't given up. The problem isn't your fear. The problem is that you've convinced yourself fear is a sign to stand still, as if uncertainty meant you shouldn't move forward. Often it's the opposite. When something scares you, it usually means it matters. It means you know that this step could set in motion things you've endured for far too long. We confuse preparation with paralysis. We tell ourselves we need more information, more signs, more approval. We invent preconditions. First, I need to save a little more. First, I have to finish this project. First, I must become emotionally stronger. And once we meet one condition, we invent the next. Year after year slips by, always with fresh excuses, always with new apparent hurdles preventing us from truly starting. Sometimes we wait because we fear failure. Other times we wait because success scares us just as much. Sounds contradictory, but it's reality. Success brings responsibility, change, visibility. Once something good happens, there's no going back. And that thought makes us nervous. That's why many prefer the gray zone of the known. Even if they're unhappy in it, at least they know what to expect. Every single day you wait for the perfect moment costs you something. Opportunities that never return. the emotional energy you waste envisioning your future instead of living it, the bottled-up frustration, the unfulfilled desires, the ideas that never come to life, and perhaps the greatest price of all, getting used to that lukewarm version of yourself, a version that survives but doesn't truly live. There's no medal for the one who waits the longest. No one will ever pat you on the back and say, "Well done, you pondered for 10 years. All that remains is lost time, and you know it. You feel it every time you vow, this time for real. But now, really, starting tomorrow, everything will change. And the next day, everything is the same. You don't need all the answers. You don't need to be invincible. You don't need to understand everything before you move. All you need is movement. One step. The first one. Even if it's shaky, even if it's small, even if you tremble. Clarity always comes en route, never beforehand. So stop waiting. Stop telling yourself tomorrow will be different if you continue today like yesterday. And understand this, the perfect moment won't knock on your door. Either you rise now and move, or you stay seated, staring at the calendar, watching your life slip by day after day, while you keep repeating the same great lie. It's not the right time yet. Chapter 2. The addiction to validation. It starts quietly, almost imperceptibly. You often don't even notice. Maybe at first it was just a fleeting glance around to see if your comment landed well. Maybe you held your smile a second longer than necessary just to be sure someone caught it. Maybe you scrapped a decision that felt right to you at the last moment because you feared what others might think. And before you know it, you're in the middle of it, trapped in the silent but merciless dependency on others' approval. The addiction to validation is insidious because it doesn't look like an addiction. It has no obvious symptoms, no clear triggers, no aha moment. It slips in, becomes part of your personality, until you believe it's just who you are. Nice, adaptable, considerate. But in truth, you're simply hooked on hearing, "You're okay. You're doing this right. We like you." What's ugly about it is that this addiction is socially rewarded. People who want to please are often seen as empathetic, team players, considerate. And yes, in the short term, this behavior earns applause. You get praise, you're called pleasant, someone people enjoy being around. But the bill comes due inside you, each and every day. Because eventually, you catch yourself making choices not for yourself, but for the reaction they'll trigger. You start censoring yourself. You soften statements because you know they could be controversial. You accept invitations you don't want. You say yes when you mean no. You do things that harm you, just because they please others. And at the end of the day, you collapse, drained by a role that was never yours. What many don't understand is that this addiction isn't harmless. It slowly eats you from within. Because you forget what you actually want. You stop trusting your own intuition. Every move becomes a calculation. How will this land? What will they think? Will I disappoint someone? And the more you chase approval, the further you drift from yourself. One morning you wake up and no longer recognize your own life. It's easy to blame society, upbringing, school, social media that constantly tricks us into thinking recognition is everything. And yes, all that plays a role. But ultimately, it's you who decides each day whether to feed that spiral or not. Whether to keep posting for likes, laughing at jokes you don't find funny, staying in friendships that feel empty just to avoid seeming selfish. There comes a point when you must ask yourself, which is worse? Others disliking you, or you disliking yourself? And this isn't a cheap call to just be yourself or ignore other opinions. It's not that simple. If this addiction has accompanied you for years, one decision won't break it. But you can begin to confront it, piece by piece. A first step is to notice how often you do things just to get validation. Observe yourself. without judgment, but honestly. How many of your responses aim to harvest approval? How many times have you said, "It's fine," while wanting to scream? How often have you bent yourself out of shape just to keep someone else from being disappointed? There will be moments when you feel like the villain. The first time you say no, where you'd always said yes. The first time you voice an unpopular opinion. The first time you decline an invitation without a laundry list of excuses. It will take courage. It will be uncomfortable. You'll feel the urge to explain, to soften, to retreat to safety. But that's exactly where the road out of dependency begins. The truth is, you won't please everyone. No matter how hard you try, people will dislike you, criticize you, misunderstand you. And you know what? That's okay. It must be okay. Otherwise, you'll spend your life in a loop where your worth depends on applause. This isn't about becoming callous or egocentric. It's about using yourself as your own benchmark, recognizing that your well-being can't hinge on others' moods, that your decisions must come from within, not from the hope of external rewards. And yes, there will be people who don't like this change, who wonder why you're suddenly setting boundaries, why you're not always available, why you don't feel responsible for everything. Some will walk away. Some will question you. But that's part of the process. And it's good. Because with every decision you make for yourself, with every moment you take yourself seriously, you gain freedom. Not overnight, but step by step. And before long, you'll wonder why you ever thought you had to shrink yourself to be liked. Chapter 3. The Mask of False Modesty. There's a lie so well disguised that we no longer recognize it. A lie we tell ourselves so often that it eventually sounds like virtue. A lie that keeps us small, immobile, and prevents us from truly savoring life. This lie is called false modesty, and it's more treacherous than any blatant self-doubt because it arrives in a seemingly innocent, almost sympathetic disguise. We sell it as humility, as realism, as common sense. But in truth, it's nothing more than fear wrapped in pretty words. It often starts with us downplaying our own achievements, immediately crediting luck or the team or circumstances. When someone says, "Well done," we find ourselves replying, "Oh, it was nothing." Not because we truly believe it, but because we've learned it could be dangerous to appear proud. This fear runs deep. Maybe it stems from childhood maxims like, "Pride comes before the fall," or "Don't get too big for your britches." Maybe we watched confident people get mocked. Maybe we ourselves faced ridicule for showing too much self-assurance. So we learned to keep our light low, to make ourselves invisible, to play it safe, always unassuming, always modest. But what we overlook is that false modesty doesn't protect us. It destroys us, bit by bit. It causes us to miss opportunities because we don't believe we deserve them. It keeps us from speaking up because we think we have nothing valuable to say. It has us sitting silently in meetings, selling ourselves short in interviews, playing second fiddle in relationships, all under the guise of, "I'm just being realistic." The irony is, we fear being seen as arrogant, but that very fear holds us back. Pride and arrogance aren't the same. Pride simply means recognizing what you've achieved, allowing yourself to feel good because you know what it cost you to get here. False modesty makes us say things like, "Someone else could have done it better. I just got lucky. It wasn't that hard." Yet deep down, we know the truth. The sleepless nights, the hard work, the moments of doubt we conquered. We know the effort, the sacrifice, the perseverance it took, and we still minimize it. This self-denial isn't just making you unhappy. It sends a message to others. "I'm not sure of myself." And people respond in kind. When you downplay yourself, others begin to undervalue you. They expect less from you, give you fewer chances, see you as someone content to stay in the background. Suddenly, the very outcome you feared happens. No one recognizes your worth. Downplaying yourself is not a sign of maturity. It's a sign of fear. And the longer you let that fear live, the bigger it grows. Eventually, you self-sabotage. You stop applying for positions you qualify for. You turn down projects you could ace. You withdraw, even when inside you're burning. All to avoid the slightest hint of, "Look at me." But what's the alternative? Spend your life selling yourself short so no one calls you arrogant? Is that really what you want? Or is it time to let yourself celebrate your successes, speak up for your ideas, and take yourself seriously? Self-confidence doesn't mean being loud or overbearing. It doesn't mean constantly talking about yourself. It simply means knowing internally who you are, what you can do, and what you're worth. So you no longer hide behind the facade of false modesty. It will feel strange. You'll question whether you're oversharing, showing off, stepping on toes. But in those moments, pause and ask yourself, who actually benefits when I shrink? Who profits from my self-denial? The answer is simple. No one, least of all you. There's no award for best self-negation, no hidden karma points for staying small. All that remains is wasted life, lost chances, and the sting of realizing you stood in your own way for far too long. It's time to drop that mask, not to become brash or boisterous, but to be real, visible, and above all, honest with yourself. Chapter 4. Break the role you've created for yourself. We all play roles. Some we choose, others slip in unnoticed over time. At first, a role can feel right. It gives us structure, belonging, a way to behave and react. But therein lies the danger. What begins as a protective mechanism eventually becomes a prison. Maybe you were always the joker, expected to lighten every moment. Maybe you were the responsible one, always in control, never making waves. Maybe you were the invisible one, staying in the background to avoid attention, or the fighter, working twice as hard because weakness was never an option. Those roles got you through hard times. They shielded you from rejection, from pain, from feeling out of place. But with each passing year, each performance of that role, it grows heavier, tighter, suffocating. And one day you realize you care more about fulfilling others' expectations than living your own life. The biggest lie we tell ourselves isn't that we might fail. It's that we must remain who we are now. We cling to that version of ourselves as if it were carved in stone, though it was often a reaction to circumstances long gone. You aren't obligated to play the same part forever. You don't have to be strong all the time. You don't have to be the always understanding friend. You don't have to be the one who never says no. You may change. You may reinvent yourself. And you may start by letting go of the stories you've been telling yourself about who you are. Of course, it's uncomfortable. It feels like betraying those who know you in that role. Friends, family, anyone who relied on that version of you. But it isn't betrayal. It's self-respect. Because deep down you know you no longer fit in that skin. Some will be unsettled when you start changing. They'll ask what's wrong with you. They'll pull you back into the old role because it's familiar. And yes, you may even doubt yourself. Wonder if you're overdoing it, if you're fooling yourself. But the worst mistake would be retreating to the old pattern just because it's safer. Change doesn't mean rejecting your past. It doesn't mean denouncing everything you were. It means acknowledging that you've grown, that you have new needs, new feelings, new facets to reveal. Sometimes it'll feel like you're losing yourself, but really, you're shedding illusions, dropping the mask. With every layer you peel away, you get closer to who you truly are. There will be days when you slip back into old patterns, when you function instead of feel. That's okay. Change isn't a straight line. There are setbacks, doubts, moments of uncertainty. But each time you consciously choose not to slide back, you reclaim a piece of freedom. You might discover you're quieter than you thought, or braver, or more vulnerable. You might realize you don't want to be everywhere, but only somewhere. among the right people. You might uncover dreams you didn't know you had. And all of that is valid. All of that is you. It's not about flipping your life overnight. It's about listening to yourself again, observing your reactions, asking if what you do still fits you, or if you're simply going through the motions. In the end, people won't remember how flawlessly you played your part. They'll remember how courageous you were to break free, how you dared to be uncomfortable, how you stopped betraying yourself. And perhaps, in the moment you let go of that role, you'll be truly seen for the first time. Chapter 5. The Myth of the Eternal Self-Sacrifice. There's a notion deeply ingrained in our minds that true greatness emerges from suffering, that one must always sacrifice, always fight, always give more than one has to earn what we call happiness. We grow up hearing stories of people who gave everything, who put themselves last until nothing remained. We applaud their devotion, their selflessness, their endless readiness to serve others. But what we ignore is how many of them end up depleted, burned out, bitter, hollowed out inside. The myth of perpetual sacrifice tells us it's noble to forget ourselves, admirable to prioritize others' needs, a moral duty to exhaust ourselves for others' sake. And without realizing, we start living by these rules. We say yes while screaming no. We stay longer, give more, swallow our resentment, accept burdens that far exceed our limits, all believing that's what a good person does. But eventually you feel something is wrong. Perhaps physically, exhaustion, insomnia, constant tension. Perhaps emotionally, irritability, emptiness, the quiet wish to disappear. Or maybe in a sudden outburst, one too many words, a confrontation that's long overdue, and you realize it can't go on like this. The problem with this never-ending loop of self-sacrifice is not only that it destroys you, it also creates a dangerous imbalance in your relationships. The more you give, the more others expect. People come to take your help for granted. Even if they mean well, they stop asking how you're really doing. They see only the role you fulfill, the rock, the shoulder, the problem solver, the strong one who always carries the load. You must understand, there's a huge difference between support and self-neglect, between care and self-destruction. Caring for others is important, but never at the cost of your mental health, your dignity, or your joy. Many believe they must give everything to others before indulging themselves. They work to exhaustion, commit every weekend, take on tasks beyond their capacity, always thinking someone will notice, will appreciate, will owe them. But usually that appreciation never comes. When it does, it's too late. Because people don't notice how much you sacrifice. They notice how reliable you are, how often you say yes, how rarely you complain. The more you give, the more is expected. The less you show your limits, the less they'll respect them. Putting yourself last isn't a sign of love. It's a sign of fear. Fear of seeming selfish, fear of rejection, fear of no longer being needed. But that fear traps you in a cycle that will push you to the brink. It's time to break that dynamic. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. You may feel guilty the first time you decline a request. You may feel bad prioritizing your needs over others' expectations. You may see people surprised when you start setting boundaries, but that is the price of your freedom. And you'll discover the world won't end if you choose yourself once in a while. Those who truly value you will learn to adapt. Those who only stayed for your sacrifices may walk away. What remains is a circle that respects you, even when you're not always available. You're not on this earth to deplete yourself. You're not here to erase your own needs so others can thrive. Your worth isn't measured by how much you can deny yourself. It's measured by how honest you are with yourself, how brave you are to be uncomfortable, how courageous you are to put yourself first. Stop clinging to that myth of martyrdom. Stop defining yourself by your sacrifices. You may say no without apology. You may care for yourself without guilt. You may refuse to diminish yourself just to fit the picture of the selfless person. It's time to stop treating yourself as an afterthought. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. Chapter 6. The Trap of Constant Comparison. It almost always begins innocently. A quick glance at your phone, a few minutes scrolling through social media, a conversation with friends, a random remark at a party. And before you know it, you're sucked into that whirlpool of comparing, weighing, and secretly judging yourself. Suddenly you find yourself asking, why are all the others so much further ahead? Why do they look better, succeed more, experience more, achieve more, love more? Why does everything seem to work out for them, while for you, it just doesn't? Comparison is one of the subtlest, and at the same time most destructive forms of self-sabotage. It sneaks into your thoughts uninvited. It sits at the table when you make plans. It whispers in your ear when you should actually be celebrating something. It's there when you're trying to push yourself, and even more so when you feel weak. And the cruelest part? It disguises itself as motivation, pretending to drive you toward greatness. But in reality, it keeps chipping away at you, piece by piece. You compare yourself to people who started from completely different places, who had other resources, other struggles, other life stories. Yet you hold your own journey up against theirs as if it were a fair race. You focus on their successes and ignore all they sacrificed to get there. You see the polished surface, but not the price paid behind the scenes. You see the outcome, but not the doubts, the failures, the sleepless nights. And the longer you stare, the smaller you feel. It's like an inner race no one officially declared, yet you keep running it, with the constant sense you're always falling behind, always under pressure to catch up. And right there lies the real danger. You stop making decisions based on what you truly want, and start chasing what you think you must have just to keep pace. You follow paths that were never yours, simply because they look successful on someone else. You set goals that don't fulfill you but only promise you the next imaginary trophy. What you miss is this. Nobody publicly showcases their losses. Hardly anyone shares the moments they failed, doubted, or questioned themselves. You're comparing your rough draft to someone else's glossy magazine cover, and in doing so, you lose all touch with your own reality. Comparisons not only destroy your self-esteem, they steal the joy of your own progress. What you accomplish today will always feel less valuable once you measure it against someone else's achievements. You'll believe it's never enough, that you could be faster, smarter, prettier, more successful. And this hunger for approval only grows with every goal you tick off. Some people spend their entire lives trapped in this cycle, chasing milestone after milestone, collecting diplomas, buying things, sculpting their bodies, polishing their image, optimizing their daily routines. And yet they feel hollow, because they never escape the gaze of others, because they're always seeking validation, because they've lost themselves in a game that can only end in defeat. If you're honest, you already know these comparisons won't get you anywhere. You feel it in those moments when you ought to be proud, but you can't be. In those times when you sabotage yourself, convinced it doesn't matter anyway. And on those quiet nights when you know all too well that you measure yourself against standards never meant for you. It's not about belittling others' achievements. It's not about giving up ambition or dreams. It's about coming back to yourself, finding your own rhythm, writing your own definition of success, joy, and fulfillment, without constantly glancing left and right, without asking at every step whether it looks good in comparison. The only standard that truly matters is how at peace you are with yourself today, whether you make decisions that arise from your own heart, or whether you still try to fit into a frame never built for you. And yes, that means accepting that others might be faster, have bigger stages, louder triumphs, or more visibility. But that's their story, and it tells you nothing about yours. It won't stop overnight. These comparisons are deeply rooted in us. But every time you consciously choose not to follow those voices, every time you remind yourself that your journey is not a competition, you reclaim a piece of yourself. And that's what it's all about in the end. Hearing your own voice again, clear and unfiltered, without the constant echo of others. Chapter 7. The Guilt of Feeling Good. It sounds absurd, almost contradictory, but that's exactly why it's so real. We feel bad when we feel good. We feel guilty whenever we experience moments of happiness, success, or ease. We hit the brakes internally the moment something feels like freedom, contentment, or pleasure. Not because we don't deserve it, but because we don't allow ourselves to. Many of us were raised to believe that happiness needs a justification, that you have to earn your comfort through hard work, suffering, or proof that you've struggled enough. Simply being happy, without explanation, without struggle, without drama, feels wrong to many, almost like betraying all those who aren't happy right now. And that's where silent self-sabotage begins. You allow yourself a small pleasure. You feel that momentary lightness, joy, inner peace. And before you can truly embrace it, the inner voice arrives. Aren't you exaggerating? Do you really deserve this? Wouldn't you be better off being more modest, quieter, less conspicuous? These feelings of guilt go by many names. Sometimes we call them responsibility, sometimes compassion. Sometimes we tell ourselves we're just being considerate. But at core, it's always the same. The deep conviction that happiness is dangerous, that it makes us vulnerable, arrogant, or that we'll somehow have to pay for it. Maybe you learned this in childhood. Maybe you heard people around you say things like, "Don't get too excited," or, "Wait, that won't last anyway." Maybe you saw others shut down anyone who got too proud, too happy, too loud. Maybe you were criticized when you celebrated your own joy, and so you began rationing your happiness, just enough to be acceptable, only until no one could complain. Even as an adult, you carry that internal brake. You turn down opportunities that could truly make you happy. You hold yourself back when you feel content. You hunt for reasons to feel worse again because otherwise it feels wrong to just be okay. But that's the biggest lie you can tell yourself. Your happiness doesn't take anything away from anyone else. Your joy doesn't steal from another. Your inner peace is not an attack. On the contrary, people who allow themselves happiness have the greatest power to spread positivity. They radiate something inspiring rather than wounding. But to get there, you must dare to break that reflex. You have to learn not to immediately downplay those moments of joy. You must be able to accept that there are days when you simply feel good. No reason, no excuse, no drama. You must recognize that you too deserve those light moments, even if others around you are suffering. Yes, there is suffering in the world. Yes, people are struggling, desperate, in pain. But your unhappiness won't help them. Your guilt won't change their situation. Shrinking yourself only makes you smaller and keeps you from getting the most out of your own life. When you feel good, live it, embrace it, enjoy it. And if guilt creeps in, ask yourself, where does it come from? Who taught you that feeling good is something to be ashamed of? Who instilled the idea that joy must be earned through suffering? There will be moments when you want to justify yourself, shrink yourself to meet others' expectations. But in those moments lies the greatest opportunity to choose differently, to allow yourself, to celebrate yourself, to take yourself seriously. Because in the end, it's not your job to feel bad all the time just to fit the image of a humble, considerate person. Your job is to be honest with yourself, to recognize when you're self-sabotaging, and then decide to be happy, right in the middle of chaos, in the midst of daily life, right now, not tomorrow, not when everything is perfect. Chapter 8. The Self-Deception of When I Have Time. Some phrases sound reasonable at first, almost responsible. "I'll do it when I have time" is one of them. It seems like a sensible prioritization, a wise weighing of duties versus dreams. You hear it everywhere, from colleagues, friends, family, and all too often from yourself. But if we're honest, that phrase is usually nothing more than a perfect excuse we've repeated until we began to believe it. The truth is, no one really has no time. We all fill our days. We decide what we spend our hours on. Of course, there are periods when our calendars overflow, commitments we can't postpone, tasks that must be done. But when we look closely, we find time for whatever truly matters in the moment. TV series, social media, endless small talk. Yet we keep telling ourselves the story of being too busy whenever it comes to things that could truly change us. I'd love to exercise, but things are just so hectic right now. I wanted to write that book, but I simply don't have the time at the moment. I'd really like to try something new, but, what we really mean is, it's not urgent enough. It's not comfortable enough. It's not safe enough. And above all, it doesn't force us to act right now. As long as we tell ourselves we'll have more time in the future, we don't have to change today. We can carry on as before without the guilt of missing out, because deep down we're thinking, later. The problem is that later doesn't exist. It's an illusion, a hollow promise to ourselves. With each passing day, not only does our list of unfinished dreams grow, but so does our fear of ever actually beginning. Someday we'll realize how long we've lied to ourselves, and that's precisely what makes this self-deception so dangerous. The reality is, time will never free itself. The perfect moment, when all obligations vanish and you can fully focus, will never arrive. You'll always feel tired, busy, drained, or distracted. That's why you must stop waiting for better conditions. It's not about turning your life upside down overnight. It's about honestly observing how no time has become an automatic response, a defense mechanism shielding you from real change. Because change always involves risk, uncertainty, effort, and sometimes failure. And you're afraid of that. Understandably. But no excuse will protect you forever. Maybe you believe you have too many responsibilities to carve out space for yourself. Maybe you're convinced you must finish certain tasks before granting yourself permission to live your own life. But deep down, you know that's not true. You know it's not about time, but about priorities. Yes, there will be days when finding even 10 free minutes feels impossible. But even then, one truth remains. When something truly matters, you find a way, not because it's easy, but because you stop lying to yourself and start taking small steps instead of waiting for a grand breakthrough. Maybe at first it's only 10 minutes a day you dedicate to your project, your body, your well-being, your idea. It may feel insignificant, but that's precisely where change begins. When you stop making excuses and start moving, even if your calendar is full, even if it's uncomfortable, even if no one applauds. And with every small step, you shed a bit of that old story you've been telling yourself, the story of, when I have time. With each conscious decision for yourself, you begin shouldering real responsibility, not for the perfect moment, but for the one that exists right now. Because in the end, it isn't your calendar holding you back, it's you. And that, you can change today, not someday. Chapter 9. The comfort of blaming others. We harbor subtle mechanisms inside us that feel so automatic we hardly notice them. Strategies hiding in everyday speech, passing thoughts here and there. One of the most convenient and simultaneously destructive tactics is consistently placing the blame for our own unhappiness on others. It starts innocently enough. A comment here, a thought there. If my boss would just acknowledge me, I'd be more motivated at work. If my parents had supported me, I'd be further along today. If my partner understood me better, I wouldn't have to justify myself all the time. We utter such phrases casually, in a chatty tone, never realizing the harm we cause ourselves. Every time we outwardly shift the reason for our stagnation, suffering, or frustration, we build one more bar in our personal prison, bars we erect ourselves day by day. Of course, people have hurt us. Situations have been unfair. Circumstances have been hard. Nobody denies that. But there's a difference between acknowledging the past and settling permanently into believing others are solely responsible for how we feel today. As long as you wait for your environment to change before you can move forward, you'll never truly progress. And that isn't an empty cliche. It's a bitter, sometimes painful truth. The real challenge is realizing that change doesn't happen when others finally treat you better, but when you stop seeing yourself as the product of your past. There's a deceptive comfort in blaming others. It relieves us. It lets us play the victim of circumstances, a feeling that, at least for a moment, seems more bearable than facing the fact we could act, but don't dare. Because while blame remains external, we risk nothing. We avoid uncomfortable talks, sidestep challenges, and dodge decisions that might catapult us out of our comfort zone. It's easier to stay in the known, even if it's painful, than to embrace the unknown. What we miss is the quiet erosion of our self-respect. The longer we hand responsibility to others, the less faith we have in our own agency. We become spectators in our own lives, supporting actors in a story we could have written ourselves. You might recognize a bit of yourself here. That subtle tightening in your gut when you think, but my case is really different. What happened to me was really severe. And you know what? It probably was. You likely experienced injustices that hurt you and left their mark. But here comes the uncomfortable part. Even if every bit of your past was unfair, it doesn't change that in this very moment, you are the only one who can decide how to go on. And yes, I know how easy it is to shut down at this point. Defenses rise. Your mind offers counter-arguments. It's not that simple. You don't know my story. If you'd been through what I have, but deep down you already know, those thoughts don't protect you. They keep you stuck. This isn't about making you feel guilty or judging your past. It's about showing you how much energy you pour into that inner courtroom each year. Energy you could use to affect real change. But as long as your focus stays on those you blame, there's no room for real movement. The insidious thing is, this dynamic can hide behind justified outrage, sarcasm, or seemingly neutral analysis of circumstances. Every time you catch yourself in that inner monologue of blame, you drift further from the chance to do things differently. Taking back control is scary because it means owning the consequences for mistakes, setbacks, and for people who might not understand your changes. But that's the price of freedom. And if you're honest, you know it's still better than the cost you're paying now. Perpetual powerlessness, frozen inside, the nagging sense you're a bystander in your own life. You don't need a radical upheaval. Small starts will do. A conversation you've only rehearsed in your head. A decision you've postponed hoping circumstances would improve. A boundary you know you should set but fear others' reactions. It's not about getting everything right overnight. It's about stopping the endless cycle of, if only they weren't, once and for all. Because life is far too short to give up the starring role in your own movie. No one will come begging for your permission. No one will hold your hand and say, now you may finally step forward. You must grant yourself that permission, today, not someday. Yes, it will hurt and require courage, but know this, it will free you in ways no excuse, no scapegoat, no victim story ever could. Chapter 10. Discomfort as the starting point. There are moments in life when everything feels constricting. You wake up knowing something's off, even though on paper everything seems fine. You drag yourself through the day, function, smile, respond, listen, decide. Yet inside you feel on a tilted plane, always slightly off balance, one misstep away from stumbling. And in those moments, something happens most people overlook. Discomfort begins to speak, softly but unmistakably. And if you're honest, you already know it's right. We've all been taught to avoid discomfort. It's treated as a sign something's wrong, an alarm to silence at once. We chase distractions, work, consumption, entertainment, anything to bury the unpleasant sensation. But in doing so, we miss this. Discomfort isn't our enemy. Quite the opposite. It's the moment your inner self starts to jolt you awake. It's the signal that what is no longer fits what you really need. Change almost never begins with joy. It begins with friction, inner unrest, questions without easy answers, sleepless nights of circling thoughts, days when small triggers knock you off course because deep down you sense a truth you've long ignored. It would be easy to dismiss discomfort as a phase. But that's the greatest risk, because the longer you try to muffle it, the louder it becomes, finding new ways to surface. Through exhaustion, irritability you can't control, or paralysis when you know exactly what you should do. Discomfort doesn't mean you've failed. It means you've grown, that your inner self no longer fits the life you built, that you evolved while your routine stayed stuck in old patterns. And that's why it's so hard. Because change doesn't guarantee everything will improve. It guarantees that everything will become different first. And different often feels unsettling. You will alienate people. You will make choices that displease some. You'll question habits that once felt safe simply because they were familiar. You'll find yourself wondering whether all this effort is even necessary, whether it wouldn't be easier to stay where you are. But it's precisely at that moment that many turn back because the forward path seems too uncomfortable. And it's the moment you can choose, whether to keep placating yourself or to find the courage to push through. Because on the other side of discomfort isn't automatically success, happiness, or satisfaction, but it is clarity. And that's exactly what you lack right now. There will be days you long for the ease of the past, but if you're honest, you know that comfort was tin-foil thin, just a veneer of habits meant to quiet you while something inside stirred. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to feel uncertain. It's okay to make mistakes, question decisions, abandon plans. But what's not okay is pretending everything's fine just because change feels uncomfortable. Discomfort isn't proof you're on the wrong path. It's proof you feel what's right, that you haven't settled with yourself, that there's still life inside you demanding you resist complacency. You don't have to figure it all out today. You don't have to know exactly where you're heading. But you must start taking that discomfort seriously, seeing it for what it really is. Your inner wake-up call, the sign something new is beginning, not because you planned it, but because you need it. So go through it, even if it's exhausting, even if it takes longer than you hoped, even if no one else understands what you're going through. Because ultimately, it's this very phase that will shape you into the person you've longed to become. Chapter 11. The fear of making the wrong decisions. There is a fear that begins quietly, unobtrusive, almost like background noise that slowly seeps into your thoughts without you consciously noticing it. At first, it feels like common sense, like prudent caution, like a sign that you're thorough, reflective, responsible. But over time it grows, louder, and eventually it paralyzes you. The fear of making the wrong decisions. Maybe you know this feeling, that endless weighing of options, that constant running through scenarios, that unceasing what if. You sit there with a decision that really should have been made already, and yet you circle around it. You look for even more information, even more opinions, even more certainty. You Google for hours, ask friends, make pro and con lists, dissect every possibility into its smallest parts, always hoping that in the end, there will come a moment when everything is clear and unambiguous. But the moment never comes. Instead comes the next thought loop, the next doubt, the next round of inner debate. And while you keep trying not to make mistakes, the one thing you actually wanted to avoid happens. You make no decision at all. What we rarely see is this. Not deciding is also a decision. Just a passive one. One in which you let others choose for you. Let chance decide. Or worse, let time simply create facts while you remain trapped in your own analysis. Of course, it sounds logical to be cautious. Of course, nobody wants to regret a decision. But somewhere along the way, we learned that making the wrong decision is worse than making no decision. And that's precisely where the problem begins. Because the truth is, there is no absolute guarantee of the right decision. Never. Not in choosing a career, not in relationships, not in moving, friendships, or personal projects. Every decision is a risk, always, because you never know what comes next, because you can never control all the variables, and the longer you wait for that uncertainty to vanish, the more you miss out on. You miss experiences. You miss growth. You miss opportunities. And what's even worse, with every decision you postpone, your own demand for the moment when you finally do decide grows. You believe it has to be especially thoughtful, especially clever, especially sure. And that's exactly what ramps up the pressure, until even the smallest choices seem like insurmountable hurdles. And you know what? Even if in the end you choose the wrong path, you'll still go on living. You'll learn. You'll course correct. You'll take detours. You'll make mistakes. And from those arise the most valuable lessons. No one who's where you want to be today got there by making every decision perfectly. Most people have been as off track as you along the way. The difference? They decided anyway. Again and again. Because courage doesn't mean having no fear. Courage means acting anyway. Even when the outcome is uncertain. Even when you don't have everything under control. And yes, you will get some decisions wrong. There will be days when you wonder why you didn't act differently. Nights when doubt keeps you awake. But you know what's worse than a wrong decision? Spending months or years making none. And eventually waking up with the bitter taste of time lost. There is no perfect answer. No magical insight that suddenly frees you from doubt. But there is something else. The decision to endure uncertainty. The willingness to set out even at the risk of error. The courage to see yourself as someone capable of handling the consequences, no matter what they turn out to be. And maybe you have to tell yourself this over and over, that you are strong enough to leave a wrong path behind, that you are wise enough to make corrections, that you are flexible enough not to cling to one choice for the rest of your life. Change doesn't happen when everything is clear and safe. It happens exactly where doubt and action meet, where you take the step anyway, where you no longer wait for someone else to confirm that your path is right. And here lies the key. It's not about right or wrong. It's about movement, about the fields of experience you only enter when you have the courage to decide for something. So stop wasting your life in endless thought loops. Stop blocking yourself with the demand to always make everything perfect. And above all, stop postponing decisions just because you're afraid of making a mistake. Because even the wrong decision moves you forward more than no decision ever will. And who knows? Maybe the choice you fear most right now is the one that will change everything in the end. Chapter 12. The romanticized lie of the comfort zone. Sometimes we tell ourselves stories about our own lives so often that we come to believe them as facts. One of those stories is, I am safe in my comfort zone. Here I know my way around. Here I know how everything works. Nothing can really surprise me here. It's the zone where everything stays predictable, where the days repeat themselves and deviations remain minimal. And that's precisely why we believe it is a place of peace, a place where we can rest. Yet what we forget is this, that seeming safety is often nothing more than a well-disguised form of stagnation. The comfort zone doesn't feel good because it fulfills us. It only feels less bad because it gives us no acute pain. But that doesn't mean it's healthy. It just means we've grown accustomed to the emptiness, to the mediocrity, to the quiet doubts we suppress every day, to the longing we push away because it makes us uncomfortable. And eventually, we even start to romanticize that emptiness. We call it stability. We call it reason. We call it groundedness. What we refuse to admit is that the comfort zone keeps us small. It makes us sluggish. It prevents us from seeing possibilities, from seizing opportunities, and keeps convincing us over and over that we're simply not made for more. And with every day we stay there, the path out becomes a little steeper. Because human beings are creatures of habit. What feels safe for years becomes the norm, and what lies beyond becomes a threat. We forget that even boredom is a sign that something's wrong. We ignore the small moments when we ask ourselves whether this is really all there is. We push down the yearning we really feel, and we feed the illusion of safety by surrounding ourselves with people doing the same thing, people who affirm each other that it's better not to risk too much, that satisfaction lies in not making mistakes, in causing no noise, in being no one's burden. But eventually comes that moment when you can't lie to yourself any longer. When you realize that your daily life may be pleasant, but it's empty. That you find yourself in conversations that no longer interest you. That you do things that no longer touch you emotionally. That your dreams grow smaller just so they fit into the confines you built for yourself. And right then you stand before a choice that can change everything. Stay in that comfort zone, knowing it will eat you alive over the long term. Or step out, even if that means making mistakes, feeling insecure, failing, being ridiculed, feeling lost. There is no middle ground. No, a little comfort zone, a little adventure. Either you stay or you go. The greatest misconception is that danger lurks outside, that every venture beyond the comfort zone automatically brings pain. But what we overlook is that out there lies growth, joy, fulfillment too. Just not immediately, not conveniently, not without resistance. Yet it's precisely that resistance that shapes you. It reveals sides of yourself you would never have discovered if you'd continued cruising through life on autopilot. There will be days when you regret your choice. Days when you want to return to old safety. Days when you tell yourself you overreacted, that the comfort zone really wasn't that bad. But if you look honestly, you know that's just fear speaking. Fear of the unknown. Fear of rediscovering yourself. You don't have to change everything at once. You don't have to turn your life upside down overnight. But you must stop pretending you're happy while you stand still inside. The greatest lie you can tell yourself is the one about later. Later I'll step out. Later I'll be braver. Later I'll think bigger. Later I'll truly live. What you're looking for you won't find in the comfort zone. Not fulfillment, not pride, not those moments when you fall into bed at night and think, this is why it's all worth it. It lies outside, where it's uncomfortable at first, where it jolts you, where you feel insecure, but where you grow in the end. The zone you occupy now only feels safe because it's familiar. But familiarity is no proof of correctness, and comfort is no substitute for life. You don't have to say goodbye forever to everything that gives you security, but you must stop hiding behind that romanticized idea of comfort. Because the truth is, it has held you back long enough. And maybe today is exactly the day you begin to change that. Chapter 13. What you don't decide still decides you. Sometimes we believe that not deciding is a neutral act, that it's the safer choice to do nothing for now, to wait, to leave everything as it is. We talk ourselves into thinking that standing still is less risky than moving, that no decision is better than the wrong one. But what we consistently overlook is this. Not deciding is still a decision, and usually not a good one. Every day you dodge a choice. Every moment you hesitate, every time you inwardly postpone a decision, has consequences. Decisions don't vanish just because you ignore them. They don't dissolve into thin air because you defer them until tomorrow. Life has no pause button. It moves on, always, with or without your active participation. And the longer you wait, the more you leave it to others or to chance to decide for you. If you don't decide to leave the relationship that makes you unhappy, you've automatically decided to stay. If you don't decide to change the job that's breaking you, you've decided to wake up every morning with reluctance. If you don't decide to pursue your dreams, you decide to bury them further. Even if you sugarcoat it or hide behind excuses, the harsh truth remains. Every non-decision is a decision against yourself. And that's what becomes so dangerous over time. Because while you're stuck in a perpetual loop of rumination and doubt, circumstances harden. Situations settle in. People get used to your silence, your endurance, your functioning. And the longer you remain in that state, the harder it becomes to change anything. Not because change is objectively impossible, but because you've grown accustomed to powerlessness. There comes a moment when you must realize that not choosing also means giving up on yourself. Because you hand over control of your life piece by piece. To circumstances, to external influences, to other people who then decide for you, because you won't. And one day you sit there wondering how it came to this. Why you feel so controlled by others. Why you feel yourself shrinking inside. The tragedy is that most people don't recognize the price they pay for their hesitation until it's far too late. They notice it when they're stuck in situations they can hardly escape. Emotionally, financially, or professionally, trapped in dead ends they helped build. Not by doing, but by passively enduring. By constantly waiting for the right moment that never arrives. Of course, it's convenient to tell yourself you still have time, that you want to observe first, that you need more information, that maybe things will get better on their own. But deep down, you already know it's just a game with yourself, a tactic to postpone responsibility, to avoid facing the uncomfortable truth that change always demands courage. And yes, decisions can be wrong. You can fail. You can be disappointed. You can realize you took a detour. But even that is better than lingering in that paralyzing uncertainty where nothing moves forward yet everything slowly falls apart. Every mistake at least propels you into motion. Every wrong decision gives you a chance to learn from it, to realign, to do better next time. What truly destroys you is not the fear of making the wrong choice, but the eternal fear of every choice. That inner state where you delay everything, overthink everything, postpone everything, and in doing so lose a bit of yourself each day. There will never be a perfect moment. There will never be absolute certainty. There will always be the unknown, always variables you can't control. But this is life. It's movement, it's risk, it's growth. And you can't expect anything to change as long as you're not willing to decide. Maybe it means disappointing someone. Maybe it means swimming against the tide. Maybe it means making mistakes and taking detours. But above all, it means taking responsibility for your life into your own hands again. And that's what it's about. Not about getting everything right at once, but about deciding at all, consciously, courageously, with all the consequences. Because if you don't, life will decide for you, and experience shows that those are rarely the choices that make you happy. Chapter 14. The Eternal Student Syndrome. It feels productive. It feels smart. Almost as if you're truly progressing. You read books, listen to podcasts, watch tutorials, sign up for webinars, book the next online course. Follow coaches who deliver new impulses on social media day after day. Your notebook is full of quotes, strategies, methods, and mindset rules. Your head is a reservoir of knowledge, your playlist an archive of inspiration. And yet, nothing happens. No real change. No concrete steps. No breakthrough. Just more input. More theory. More I just have to before I begin. What feels like progress is often stagnation in disguise. You believe you're on the right path when in fact you're spinning in circles. And the more knowledge you accumulate, the greater the uncertainty, because each new insight brings new doubts. What if I still don't know enough? What if I overlook something important? What if there's a better way out there that I'm missing? You tell yourself you can't start yet because you're missing something. More preparation, more expertise, more validation. You don't want to make mistakes. You want to get it right from the outset. So you wait. Learn more. Gather more. And while you do all that, time slips by. Weeks, months, sometimes years. And you don't notice how you drift further away from what you actually wanted. Real change, real results, real experiences. The problem with this attitude isn't learning itself. Learning is important. Continued education is valuable. But knowledge alone does nothing if it doesn't translate into action. If every new insight only leads you to spin another cycle, buy another book, take another course, without ever stepping into action. Eventually, you must stop being a student and start treating your life as your own project. Not as a case study, not as a mental exercise, but as what it is, your reality. Maybe you fear embarrassment, fear making mistakes, publicly failing, admitting that despite all your knowledge, you still have no control. But that's exactly the trap, because the more you wait, the larger that fear grows. The stronger the inner voice that whispers you're not ready yet. And eventually the pile of unused knowledge gets so high, you no longer dare to start at all. Many people don't realize they're already stuck in this endless loop. They feel productive because they constantly consume new content. They consider themselves ambitious because they always book the next training. They think they're on the right track just because they keep gathering input. But those who never take action remain mere spectators in their own lives, observers with full notebooks but empty experiences. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because to break free, you must consciously decide to leave the comfort zone of knowledge. You must begin to make mistakes. You must accept that theory is only half the truth. The other half emerges through doing, through failing, through getting up again, through course correction. And you're most afraid of exactly that, because it means becoming visible, vulnerable, stepping out of the safe position of the eternal student. It's not enough to know everything about self-love if you keep shrinking yourself. It's not enough to master every business strategy if you never reach out to a first customer. It's not enough to study every nutrition concept if you never change your shopping list. Knowledge without implementation is worthless. It's like a gym membership you never use, like a ticket to a concert you don't attend, like a key you never put in the lock. And yes, the first step won't be perfect. You might stumble, feel insecure, wish you'd read one more book before you started. But it's precisely in this imperfection that opportunity lies. In real doing, in learning through experience, in discovering through action. You may be proud of the knowledge you've amassed, but now it's time to turn it into something, to decide. Not on perfect execution, but on the first real step, even if it's shaky, even if it feels small. Because what propels you forward isn't the next chapter in a self-help book. It's the experience you gain when you leave theory behind and finally start living. Chapter 15. The necessity of closing chapters. There are phases in life that stretch like chewing gum. Relationships that long ago passed their expiration date. Jobs that haven't fulfilled us for years. Friendships maintained only out of habit or courtesy. Habits we cling to even though they do more harm than good. And yet, we hold on. Again and again. Not because we believe it's right, but because we're afraid of drawing a line under it. Because we dread the moment we'd have to say once and for all, "This ends here. I won't look back." Closing a chapter rarely feels easy. It means admitting that something is over, that certain people have played their role in our lives and may now leave, that particular places, rituals, or life phases have lost their meaning. And that very moment of farewell, the conscious act of letting go, is for many the point at which they'd rather circle around one more time than look honestly at the end. We've become masters at coming up with reasons why now isn't the right time. Maybe we hope something will still change on its own, that it will get better if we just try hard enough, that there might be a twist we didn't anticipate. And so we hold on, even though we're already burned out inside. We stay in situations that drain our energy just because the idea of a new beginning scares us more than continuing in what's wrong. But what we forget is this: every open chapter drains us, day after day, subtly but relentlessly. It steals our clarity because part of us still clings to the past, still hopes for change that will never come. And while we lie to ourselves, time goes on. Opportunities pass by. New encounters remain superficial because our hearts are half bound to old stories. It's not about radically ending everything that was ever difficult, and it's not about fleeing at the first sign of trouble. It's about being honest with yourself, recognizing when a chapter is truly closed, even when it hurts, even when memories cling to it, even when gratitude for what once was still lives. Because that's the point. You can cherish something and still let it go. You can look back with warmth in your heart and still say, now it's time for something new. Sometimes you need that decisive cut to create space for what's next. As long as you keep yourself in the waiting loop, there is no room for fresh stories, no energy for new connections, no focus for your next steps. Everything stays vague, half-hearted, unclear. And eventually you wonder why your life feels like an endless repeat, even though you so desperately crave change. Closing a chapter means taking responsibility for yourself, for your boundaries, for your needs. It means consciously deciding you will no longer remain in situations that keep you small just because they're comfortable or familiar. And yes, that decision hurts, perhaps more than you expected. You might wonder if you're ungrateful, if you're too harsh, if you're letting go too quickly. But deep down, you'll know that now is exactly the time. You may be sad. You may have doubts. You may feel memories wash over you, softening you for a moment. But you must move on, with clear vision, with the knowledge that you owe it to yourself not to stay stuck in stories whose endings you already know. And you'll perhaps discover that the pain of letting go isn't half as destructive as the pain you feel when you keep overruling yourself. When you stay, though everything inside of you screams for departure. When you keep yourself small just to hold on to old pictures. It's about consciously closing the door, not quietly, not secretly, not hoping you can reopen it later, but with clarity, with resolve, with respect for what was, and with the courage to make room for what may come. Chapter 16. The fear of standing out. You have stood in this exact spot more than once in your life. There was that opportunity, that moment when you could have shown yourself, when you had the chance to voice an idea, make a suggestion, step into the spotlight, become visible. Every fiber of your being knew you had something to say, that you had skills, that you had something to offer. And yet, you stayed silent. You leaned back. You made yourself small. You pretended you'd rather be part of the crowd than willingly stay in the background. Not because you had nothing to say, but because the fear of standing out was greater than the desire to finally be seen. This fear wears many masks. Sometimes it appears as false modesty. Sometimes as exaggerated self-criticism. Sometimes as that inner mantra you repeat to yourself, "It's not important enough." Or, "Who am I to speak up?" Or, "What if I embarrass myself?" And here the real mechanism kicks in. You sabotage yourself before anyone else ever could. The problem is we've been taught for years that standing out is dangerous. Whoever stands out will be judged. Whoever stands out makes themselves vulnerable. Whoever stands out risks rejection. And that fear runs deep. Maybe in school you learned what happens when you stick your neck out. Maybe in your family you learned it's better to stay quiet. Maybe you convinced yourself that fitting in is the safest way to get by. And so, step by step, you pushed yourself into a role that protects you, but also paralyzes you. You believe you're preserving harmony by holding back. You believe you're being considerate by not speaking your mind. You believe you're being humble by downplaying your successes. But in truth, none of that comes from consideration. It comes from fear. Fear of others' gazes. Fear of comments. Fear that someone won't like you if you show who you really are. And this is where you must be honest with yourself. It's not about being loud just for the sake of being loud. It's not about constantly seeking the spotlight or artificially staging yourself. It's about no longer putting the brakes on yourself when you have something to say. It's about giving yourself permission, your opinion, your strengths, your worth. Because with every moment you hold back, you send yourself a message. I'm not important enough. And that message sinks deep into your self-image. It becomes your truth. And the longer you keep yourself invisible, the harder it is to break that inner conviction. You must learn to bear the thought that not everyone will like you, that not everyone will applaud when you speak, that some people will criticize you, question you, even mock you. Yet you still need to stand up for yourself. Because the alternative is to continue fading into the crowd, continuing to keep your ideas to yourself, continuing to watch others pass you by. Not because they're better, but because they dare to be visible. Success, in any form, begins when you're willing to stand out. When you show up even if your voice shakes. When you step forward even if your knees feel weak. When you choose yourself, even at the cost of exposing yourself to others' judgment. There will be moments when you wonder if it's worth the effort, if you shouldn't just return to the safe shadows. But precisely in those moments lies the chance to break the pattern. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present. Not hiding any longer. Not waiting for the perfect moment when all conditions align. You may be proud of what you can do. You may take up space. You may make mistakes and still keep going. And you may finally stop thinking yourself small just to fit others' expectations. The world doesn't change for those who make themselves invisible. It changes through those who are willing to stand up, with their name, their stance, their energy, for what moves them. And even if it's uncomfortable, even if it requires courage, you owe it to yourself. Chapter 17. The freedom to stop explaining yourself. There comes a phase in life when you slowly realize how much energy you spend justifying yourself. Not because anyone explicitly demanded it, but because you've conditioned yourself over years to believe you must provide a reasonable, logical, and acceptable explanation for every decision. Maybe at first it was only small situations, an excuse for skipping a meeting when you simply needed peace, a justification for withdrawing from an argument, even though you knew it would only drag you back into a cycle of defense. But over time it grew, longer, more elaborate, and infinitely more exhausting. The deeper you sink into this pattern, the more you lose touch with what truly matters, your own clarity. Because while you strive to cover every contingency, preempt every misunderstanding, and answer every potential question in your head, you drift further away from your original conviction. What began as an inner impulse becomes an argument marathon that leaves you drained. What often gets lost is that with every extra explanation, you cede a bit of your own sovereignty. The more you defend, the more you doubt your decision, not because it was wrong, but because you've dragged it into an arena where it must be defended. And that's when you should ask yourself, why do I feel obligated to defend it at all? The truth is, You owe no one an account of decisions you've made responsibly for yourself. Of course, there are exceptions, situations where explanation is a matter of respect. But that's not the pattern we're talking about. We're talking about the inner compulsion to justify every yes, every no, every maybe, even your silence. The longer you feed that compulsion, the more entangled you become in paralyzing thought loops. You start evaluating decisions by how easily explainable they'll be later. You question any action. Will it spark misunderstandings? Upset someone? Force me to defend myself again? Before you know it, you're avoiding choices, not because they're wrong, but because you dread the stress of later explanations. What you must recognize is that those who truly want to be part of your life don't need endless justifications. They sense when a decision comes from genuine conviction. They don't need every detail to respect your path. And those who keep questioning you, even after 100 explanations, aren't seeking your why. They're seeking comfort in keeping you within their expectations. The freedom to stop explaining yourself begins the moment you decide to take yourself seriously. It doesn't mean acting without consideration or deliberately offending people. It means granting yourself permission to make decisions from your heart, without wrapping them in epic justifications. It means valuing your integrity higher than the temporary harmony bought by endless excuses. You'll find not everyone will be delighted when you set clearer boundaries. There will be surprise, questions, maybe even disappointment or resistance. But here you see how much you can stand behind yourself, not by defending, but by holding your decision firm without belittling it. Each time you qualify your choice, you signal that your needs are negotiable, and it's time to end that. Next time you make a decision and your first impulse is to explain, pause. Ask, who really needs this explanation? Will it clarify something necessary, or only ease the pressure of others' expectations? If you find yourself slipping back into the old habit, breathe. Stand by your yes, your no, or your maybe, and move on. Without detours, without endless words, without selling yourself short. You're not here to make yourself perpetually understandable. You're here to make decisions that give your life direction. And sometimes that's enough. No footnote, no afterword, no extra chapter. Chapter 18. The Trap of Forced Positivity. There is a form of optimism that doesn't heal but wounds. A kind of positivity that doesn't build up but creates pressure. I'm talking about that compulsive positivity that in recent years has become a mantra in self-help books, social media feeds, and coaching seminars. Always look on the bright side. Think positive. Everything happens for a reason. Or, just shift your energy and all will be well. While these phrases sound uplifting at first, they often conceal the opposite. A subtle emotional self-denial. What happens when you have a rotten day? When you feel disappointed, angry, or hurt? When you're afraid or doubtful? In a world where positivity is mandatory, there's little room for these feelings. You swallow them, mask them with a fake smile. Tell yourself nothing is that bad. You just need to change your perspective. Other people manage to stay upbeat all the time. And this is where the inner imbalance begins. Forced positivity treats any emotion that isn't light and bright as a weakness. It implies something's wrong with you when you don't feel motivated, when you don't go through your day full of gratitude, when instead of vision boards and affirmations, you just want to lie in bed and feel nothing for a while. Believing that isn't allowed, you start battling your own sadness, your anger, your fear. The result? These emotions grow stronger, because what is suppressed does not vanish. It accumulates until it overwhelms you at the worst possible moment. What nobody says out loud. It's okay to think negatively sometimes. It's normal to go through phases when you have no desire for optimism, when you question everything, when you feel disappointed by others, by life, even by yourself. These phases aren't signs of failure. They're signs you're alive, that you're connected to what's happening inside you. Of course, this isn't an invitation to wallow in self-pity or settle permanently in anger. It's not about staying stuck in negative emotions. It's about giving them the space they need, acknowledging them, feeling them, without trying to smile them away or plaster them over with motivational slogans, without treating them as a malfunction to be fixed immediately. True positivity doesn't come from denial. It grows where you dare to sit with discomfort, where you stand in the middle of chaos and still decide to move forward someday, not by banishing negative thoughts, but by listening to them, experiencing them, then choosing to let them go when the time is right. Here lies the real strength, not in perpetual grinning or half-hearted gratitude lists checked off because they're on your morning routine. Real power lies in holding all parts of yourself, light and shadow, clarity and confusion, euphoria and exhaustion. When you begin to free yourself from this compulsion to be upbeat and solution-oriented at all times, you'll feel the pressure lift. You won't have to justify every low point with a positive takeaway. You'll be allowed to have a day when nothing goes right, without hunting for a lesson in it. You can be disappointed, angry, sad, or tired, and you'll know it will pass, not because you plaster on a smile, but because you gave it space. The trap of forced positivity is insidious because it makes you believe happiness only exists when you're constantly cheery. But that's an illusion. Real happiness stays with you even when you're not strong. It remains when you doubt. It doesn't abandon you just because you question everything for a day. You don't have to play a role to be worthy of life. You don't have to justify every thought that isn't in the high vibes only category. And above all, you mustn't belittle yourself for reacting like a human. It's not about negativity or positivity. It's about authenticity. About accepting all emotions without judgment or categorization. And choosing to step back into the light after phases of darkness, not because you must, but because you eventually want to. Chapter 19. The emptiness after achieving what you wanted. You pushed yourself hard, months, maybe years. You made plans, wrote lists, sacrificed nights, kept motivating yourself even when you wanted to give up. You fought self-doubt, endured setbacks, pushed past boundaries you once thought insurmountable. And now you stand at the point you set as your goal. You made it. Logically, you'd expect that all-encompassing rush of joy, that moment when everything clicks and makes sense. Yet instead, there's nothing. An emptiness spreading slowly but relentlessly. It surprises you because you didn't expect it. It doesn't fit the picture you painted in your mind. And that's why it feels wrong. Almost like a betrayal of your own dream, proof that all the effort was for nothing. What you're experiencing now is something many keep quiet about. Because no one likes admitting that the big goal they fought so hard for doesn't bring the fulfillment they hoped. We talk about the journey, the hurdles, the motivation to persevere. But hardly anyone speaks about what comes after. About that inner void that appears when success arrives, and nothing really changes in how you feel about yourself. Perhaps along the way you lost something, you for instance. Maybe you lived so much in fight mode that you no longer know what it feels like just to arrive. Maybe chasing that goal became your identity. And now that it's gone, you don't know what should take its place. The moment after reaching a big goal forces you to pause. For the first time in ages, you're not chasing something. You're not driven. And that is scary. Because suddenly you have time to sense what lies beneath. The questions you postponed, the doubts you drowned out with action, the insecurities that never really left but for which you never had time. What many don't understand, success doesn't heal inner wounds. It only masks them for a while. If you believed the next career step, the new apartment, the past exam, or the fulfilled relationship would compensate for what you can't accept within yourself, then now is the moment that truth will catch up. And it's harsh, uncomfortable, disappointing, but also necessary. Because here begins the most honest part of your journey. It's no longer about fighting external obstacles. It's about holding yourself, asking why that goal was so important, whether it was truly for you or for recognition, validation, security, whether you needed to prove something, and if so, to whom. It's okay if these questions hurt. It's okay if you feel like you're losing your footing. It doesn't mean you failed. It only means you're at a point where superficial fixes no longer suffice, where you must start being honest with yourself, and where you realize that the real goal was never what you achieved externally, but what lies before you now. Truly getting to know yourself, without distraction, without new to-do lists, without the next big project consuming you again for months. There will be a phase when you don't know how to proceed, when you ask what the next step is, even though you've just learned that constant motion isn't the answer. And in that very uncertainty lies your chance. Because this is when you first stop running on autopilot, when you make decisions not to fill the next gap, but because you genuinely want them. This emptiness isn't your enemy. It's an invitation to consciously choose how your life continues, not driven, not guided by old patterns, but free, thoughtful, and above all, authentic. You don't have to feel ashamed if this moment overwhelms you. You don't have to judge yourself if you discover that happiness isn't in achieving goals, but in how you treat yourself when there's no applause or new milestone. You can realign yourself, and you can recognize that the real journey begins now. Chapter 20. Living without asking permission, an act of responsibility. There comes a moment when you realize that what you thought was consideration was really self-betrayal. What you thought was politeness was really fear. Fear of taking yourself seriously. Fear of being visible with everything that makes you, you. And above all, fear of making decisions without first filtering them through the invisible committee of others' approval. Living without asking permission doesn't mean carelessly barreling through life, refusing compromise or trampling others. Nor does it mean stubbornly imposing your will without regard. It means something far more uncomfortable. It means taking responsibility for yourself, for your decisions, for their consequences. As long as you wait for someone else to say, "Yes, go ahead. Yes, that's right. Yes, you may," you remain in a passive role. You abdicate responsibility for your life to others, perhaps unconsciously but effectively. You allow your uncertainty to outweigh your own will, and in doing so you become a background character in your own life while dreaming of being the protagonist. The point is, there will never be a moment when everyone cheers your change. There will never be an official green light stamped, "Now is the right time to stand up for yourself." You must give yourself that permission, and herein lies the essence of true responsibility. Not because it's the easy route, but because no one else will do it for you. Perhaps you believe you need to wait for better circumstances, more confidence, less fear. But the longer you wait, the more you reinforce the notion that every move in your life needs absolution, from friends, family, colleagues, societal expectations, or some vague authority in your mind. The truth is, there's no better time than now to stop. You will make mistakes. You will disappoint people. You will doubt yourself again and again. But that's part of the deal when you stop hiding in life's waiting room. Living without asking permission means making decisions without mentally vetting them through 100 external perspectives. It means owning the outcomes of those decisions. No excuses, no blame, no constant second-guessing. It means facing uncomfortable consequences without sliding back into old patterns of self-denial. You're not here to preemptively correct yourself before anyone else speaks. You're not here to question every desire, every longing, every idea until you convince yourself to abandon them. You're here to live decisions, to have experiences, to err, to restart, to take detours, but above all, to take your life into your own hands. The difference between a life of fear and a life of responsibility isn't that doubts vanish in the latter. It's that you act despite those doubts, that you move, that you stop sending yourself into the waiting loop just because you think someone out there must raise a hand to give you permission for your own happiness. There will be days you long for the old invisibility, the safety of making no real decisions so you can't go wrong. But those days will grow fewer. The more you move, the more you realize you can get by without others' approval. The freer you become, not because everything is suddenly easy, but because you stop betraying yourself. In the end, it's not about being louder, harsher, or more uncompromising. It's about being more genuine, not playing small anymore, not standing in your own way, and above all, stopping the habit of asking permission at every step. You may, because you live, because you feel, because you're here. And that is reason enough. And here you are now, at the end of this audiobook, or perhaps at the beginning of something long overdue. If this touched you, shook you awake, or inspired you, let me know. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, or recommend this audiobook to those who need to hear it now. And if you want more of this kind of clarity, subscribe to the channel so we can meet again. But above all, go forth without apology.